In this week's Parsha, we meet a most consequential and impactful person. It's Parshas Beshalach. And at the end of the Parsha, the nation is fresh off their resounding victory. They have the Exodus, 7 days later, the showdown at the sea, and the splitting of the sea, and the nation walks in dry land between walls of water, and the Egyptians follow suit, and the waters crash down upon them. And this creates this amazing crescendo at the sea. The nation erupts in spontaneous song to celebrate the great miracle that the Almighty performed for them. But the Parsha proceeds with talking about all sorts of challenges that arose. The nation reached a peak, a pinnacle, and that is followed with all sorts of new and unanticipated challenges. Twice, they're stranded without water, and they don't have food. You're in the desert, and you don't really have a plan, and there's a nation of millions of people, and there's nothing to drink, and finally you arrive in a place, and there is water, but the water's bitter, and that's the first challenge, and there's another challenge, there's no water at all, and Moshe is told to strike the rock, and the water erupts forth from the rock. And there's no food, and then manna comes, manna from heaven. And this is positioning the nation where they were reliant on the Egyptians. The Egyptians designated and designed their life, and now it's time to rely on God. And the nation is put into very difficult circumstances where they have to really develop and flex that muscle of reliance on God. Now, at the end of the Parsha, we read about a new problem, a new threat. The nation is attacked. They're attacked by another nation, the nation that serves as the arch enemy of our people, the nation of Amalek. One menace has been drowned, and now a new menace arises. The nation was in a place called Rephidim, and they were attacked, and they launched a counterattack. And the counterattack is very unusually designed. Moshe tells his student, Joshua, go select men and make war against Amalek tomorrow. And while you go to war in the valley against Amalek, I'm going to go on top of the mountain with Aaron on one side, with Hur on the other side, and I'm going to pray. And this is the two-tiered method of war, where Moshe is waging the spiritual war. He's the spiritual general of the people. And Joshua, Moshe's attendant, Moshe's student, Moshe's aide, Moshe's right-hand man, he is going to lead the physical battle in the valley below against Amalek. Now, this is the first time that we're going to be introduced to Joshua. Joshua, son of Nun, Yehoshua ben Nun, or bin Nun. And 40 years after the events of our Parsha, Moshe is going to pass. And Moshe is going to ask God, before he passes, for a successor. The nation should not be a flock that does not have a shepherd. And Moshe, when he asks God to appoint a successor, he thought that his sons would be worthy candidates to replace him. But God designates Joshua. Joshua, Moshe's trusty student who never departed his side. Joshua is going to be Moshe's descendant. And indeed, Joshua takes over the reins from Moshe, and he leads the nation into the Holy Land, the crossover of the Jordan, the wars against the 17s of Canaan, and the conquest and the settlement of the land. Now, Joshua is described as almost a mirror image of Moshe. Moshe was like the sun, and Joshua was like the moon. Now, the sun and the moon are exactly the same size from our perspective. There was something similar between Joshua and Moshe, but Joshua is the ultimate student, the faithful protege of Moshe. Whatever Moshe taught, whatever Moshe projected, Joshua reflected it faithfully. And the first time he appears is in this week's Parsha. And if you read the story, it seems like Joshua did a phenomenal job. Moshe is up on top of the mountain and he raises his arms. Aaron is on one side. Hur is on the other side. Who's Hur? Hur is Moshe and Aaron's nephew. Moshe and Aaron have an older sister, Miriam, and her son is Hur. And Moshe is fighting the spiritual battle on top of the mountain. And down below, Joshua is waging the physical battle against the people of Amalek. And the good guys win. Our nation wins. But if you read the story very carefully, it seems like Joshua's victory was incomplete. The verse says, Vayechelash Yehoshua. Joshua weakened Amalek and his nation with a sword. Joshua used weapons of war to weaken Amalek. Now we know there's a mitzvah for us to wage war against Amalek. But the Torah uses very clear terminology. We're not told to weaken Amalek. It's the one nation that is completely irredeemable, and we're told that we must completely and utterly and thoroughly annihilate Amalek. We have to erase its memory from underneath the sun. So long as Amalek exists, the throne of God is incomplete. So if you look at Joshua, this is his introduction. And the first thing that he does, if we were to examine it very carefully, it seems like Joshua did not do what he needed to do. What Joshua really needed to do was to completely and thoroughly and totally and utterly annihilate Amalek. He won, sure, but he only weakened Amalek. Now, this may not sound like such a big deal, but we have a corollary of this story where a king of Israel, failed to utterly annihilate Amalek. And that, of course, is King Saul. And when King Saul failed to annihilate Amalek, he was fired. He was deposed. God said, "You're no longer king. We're going to find a replacement." That's going to be David. So the misdeed of incomplete destruction of Amalek is enough to remove a sitting king from his throne. And somehow, when Joshua made the same mistake, he was not rendered ineligible for the throne, for the position as Moshe's successor. So it's interesting. We have this character in the Torah who's going to play a very important role as Moshe's successor, and the first time he appears in the Torah, it doesn't seem to be an unbridled success. It seems like there's something incomplete or maybe flawed about Joshua's work. Let's take a look at what happened next. When does Joshua appear the second time in the Torah? So it's also in the book of Exodus. We know that the nation, a few weeks after the Exodus, they go to Mount Sinai. And there's the whole preparation for the Sinai revelation. And there's this incredible event where an entire nation experiences prophecy at Mount Sinai. And they experience it, and they live an unparalleled, unprecedented, never before, never since has such an event happened. And this event is the most foundational event of all of human history. Revelation of an entire nation at Sinai. The following day, Moshe ascended the mountain to get the details of the Torah. The Ten Commandments are almost like a digest of the Torah. These 10 commandments, we're told, they contain the root of all of Torah. But it's not enough for us to have the root of all of Torah. We have to have the entirety, all the details of Torah. So the following day, Moshe goes up the mountain. And when he goes up the mountain, he appoints people to oversee the nation in his absence. This is in chapter 24 of Exodus. He tells the aforementioned Aaron and Hur, anyone that has a question, go to them. They're in charge of the nation in my stead. And Moshe goes up to the mountain. And he is accompanied by Joshua. Joshua goes as far as he's allowed to go, and then Moshe departs on his own up the mountain. What happens when Moshe ascends the mountain? What does Joshua do? Joshua stays there. He doesn't leave. He remained at the foot of the mountain for 40 days until Moshe returned. Everyone else went back to the camp. We'll come back in 40 days, sure. But Joshua didn't leave Moshe's side, and he went as close as possible to Moshe and remained there for 40 days. Our sages tell us that in the camp reigned a daily portion of manna. And outside the camp, there was also manna for one person, for Joshua. He didn't leave Moshe at all. And even when he wasn't able to be by Moshe's side, he remained as close as possible to Moshe. What happened next? So we know the nation, at the end of the 40 days, there's this terrible, calamitous event, the golden calf. And Hur tries to stop them, and he's slaughtered. And Aaron recognizes that they will slaughter him as well, so he tries to delay, and eventually, in some very mysterious fashion, he actually seems to collaborate with the sinners to make the golden calf. And meanwhile, Moshe in heaven, he's getting the tablets, and God says, you have to go down quickly because your nation's corrupting. And then in chapter 32 of Exodus, Moshe descends the mountain. And he's bearing the 2 tablets. And he meets Joshua. And the Torah records their dialogue. And there's noise, there's sounds emanating from the camp. And Joshua tells Moshe, I think there's a war happening in the camp. And Moshe says, no, you have it wrong. These are not the sounds of warriors winning a battle. These are not the sounds of warriors losing a battle. These are sounds of distress. And of course, they go down to the camp and they see the golden calf, and Moshe shatters the tablets, and the story proceeds from there. This is the second appearance of Joshua in the Torah. Joshua at the foot of the mountain. And the Torah could very easily have omitted this conversation. We have we have Joshua diagnosing the sounds from the camp. And Moshe says, no, 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 you got it wrong. You're misattributing the sounds. These are not sounds of victory or loss. This is a different category of sound. The second time that Joshua appears, again, he's making some judgment that's wrong. And the Torah goes out of its way to tell us this. If this conversation was omitted, the story would be complete, right? The Torah goes out of its way to say, oh, Joshua said X, and Moshe says, no, you're wrong. This is why. This is something else. Joshua appears again. And again, this same pattern follows. This is already the book of Numbers. This is in Parshat Beshalach. Moshe is told to select 72 sages that will be minted as prophets, and 70 of them will actually qualify to be prophets, while 2 of them will be candidates who ultimately do not become prophets. That's the background of the story. There are 72 candidates, because that's divisible by 12, 6 from every tribe. But only 70 of them will qualify. So 2 of them are going to be nominated, but will have to go home empty-handed. And the Torah tells us that there were 2 candidates, Eldad and Medad, who were candidates, but decided to not participate in the selection process. The way it worked, there was a big hat. In it, there were 72 pieces of paper. On 70 of them, it said Zaken, which means an elder. And on 2 of them, it was blank. 2 were blank pieces of paper. Whoever picked up a ticket that said Zaken, they became immediately imbued with prophecy. And whoever picked the blank paper, you're a candidate, sure, but you're not going to be a prophet. And these 2 elders, they were so sure that they weren't worthy, that they would pick the blank card, that they said, we're not going to go join the other sages. So there's a selection process to select 70 out of 72, but 2 of those 72 remain in the camp. And meanwhile, outside the camp, 2 of the 72 candidates pull out blank cards, and therefore in the camp, Eldad and Medad become prophets right away. And they start prophesying. And they publicly announce Moshe will die, and Joshua will lead the nation into the land. It's a very dramatic story. Eldad and Medad, the rogue prophets. And when Joshua hears about this, he gets very angry. This is a dishonor to Moshe. So he urges Moshe to punish these 2 rogue prophets. Joshua makes a proposal, and Moshe rejects it. Are you being zealous in my honor? You want me to punish these 2 people? I wish the entire nation would be like these 2 people. For the 3rd time, Joshua's actions and his assessments are not complete. He thought that it would be appropriate to punish these 2 rogue prophets. And Moshe says, no, you have it wrong. I wish everyone was like them. And again, the Torah could have omitted this misjudgment of Joshua, and we would be none the wiser. But the Torah records it. And again, for the 3rd time, Joshua's actions are imprecise. Joshua appears one more time before he is nominated as Moshe's successor. That's in the disastrous episode of the spies. The spies sent to scout the land. 12 men from 12 tribes. 10 of them go rogue and slander the land. Joshua and Caleb. Joshua from the tribe of Ephraim, Caleb from the tribe of Judah. They remain true and loyal to God, to the land, to Moshe. So certainly Joshua is going to be praised for his valiant and unshakable faith in this episode. But if you look at it very carefully, you could still nitpick. You could still nitpick with Joshua. In that episode, Joshua is renamed. He was originally called Hoshea, and then Moshe renamed him Yehoshua. He added the letter Yud to the word Hoshea. And the commentaries tell us that the word Hoshea, it means salvation. But the word Yehoshua, that's a reference to not only have salvation for yourself, but to also create salvation for others. And the commentaries tell us that Moshe renamed Joshua from Hoshea to Yehoshua because he was responsible to make sure that the entire party of all 12 don't go awry. Moshe was aware that there was a risk in this mission, in this expedition. And Moshe says, Joshua, you're not Hoshea, you're Yehoshua. You must save everyone here from disaster. So even though Joshua himself, Joshua and Caleb, they remain righteous, it's hard for us to say that Joshua's fourth appearance in the Torah was a complete success. If Moshe tasked Joshua with making sure that the expedition does not go off the rails, he fell short because it went off the rails big time. These are the four appearances of Joshua in the Torah. The fifth, Moshe says, I need a successor, and God points to Joshua. And the question is, why was Joshua selected? And the answer is a very valuable one for us. What makes someone great? So we may have an impression or an understanding that people are born with certain talents and certain righteousness and certain nobility from youth, and they're destined for greatness from day one. Maybe there's a path for that. That is not Joshua's path. Joshua was not a flawless wunderkind. You read his stories, the Torah tells us his stories. He's nominated to succeed Moshe, and you look back and you see a checkered history. And in every appearance of Joshua, you can find a flaw. And the Torah tells us the critique that Moshe gave him. No, these are not the sounds of winners or losers in battle. It's a different sound. Joshua, you have it wrong. Oh, you want me to punish Eldad and Medad? No. I wish everyone was like them. I have the complete opposite take on this event. Joshua was given a very important job to go destroy Amalek. He weakened them. Joshua was nominated to keep the scouting expedition in check, and we don't see full success. And the Torah chronicles Joshua's apparent failures. And it seems like Joshua's path to become Moshe's successor, it's told in the Torah. And it's told in a very counterintuitive manner. He made miscalculations. Sure. But those were all steps in his development. He didn't achieve the pinnacle despite those imperfections. It's the opposite. These were all stages in his growth. The Torah has a very interesting label that it assigns to Joshua. He's called a student. And he's called a nar, a youth. And we're told that for 40 years, Joshua did not leave the tent of learning. He did not depart Moshe's side for 40 years. Moshe goes up the mountain, and everyone else goes back to the camp. Joshua is so connected to his teacher. He's the ultimate student. What does it mean to be a student? What is the definition of a student? A student is someone who wants to learn. A student is the acknowledgement of incompleteness and the imperative for more instruction, for more direction, for more guidance. The Torah describes Joshua as a student. That's who he was. His essence was about always improving, always refining, always growing, always advancing. For a student, a blunder, a misstep, a misjudgment, a miscalculation, a misassessment, that's part of what it means to be a student. You redirect. You take the lesson and improve and refine. A mistake and imperfection is fertile grounds for more improvement. Joshua is a student, he's also a youth. And we think of a youth, what does it mean to be a youth? It means to be, I don't know, an adolescent. When the Torah calls Joshua a youth, I did the math. He was 42 years old. None of us would describe, I guess today they say, oh, the coddling of the Americans till you're 26, you're under your parents' insurance. People in their 30s, they're still playing video games in the basement. So maybe in our society, that someone who's 42, we could understand that they're still young. But Joshua already had the battle against Amalek behind them. And they're called a youth. It's not a description of age. It's a perspective. A youth is someone who is still developing, who is still progressing, who is unfinished, who is a work in progress. Joshua is a student. He's a youth. He understands he's not ready. And inevitably, there's going to be missteps. And those are productive opportunities to learn, to improve, to course correct, to recalibrate, to adjust. If you make a great leader in a lab, you expect them to nail it the first time. Joshua was not made in a lab. He's a youth. He's a student. And those mistakes, missteps are all part of how he became Moshe's successor. If you were to look at Joshua's story, you would say, well, all I see, if I look closely, I see just missteps. But if you understand that he's a youth, he's a student, these are actually stepping stones in his path of ascent. Joshua was one of the 12 spies sent to scout the land. And we know the nation had a very detailed hierarchy of leaders. Of course, Moshe was the leader of them all. But then there were leaders of 10. Every group of 10 had a leader. And every group of 50, so that's 5 tens, would have a leader. And every group of 100 would have a leader. And every group of 1,000 would have a leader as well. Right before Sinai, we know that Jethro comes and he makes that whole hierarchical system. That means that the 600 greatest sages after Moshe were leaders of 1,000. And the next 6,000 were leaders of 100. And the next 12,000 were leaders of 50. And so on. Which one was Joshua? Joshua was a leader. Was he a leader of 10, of 50, of 100, of 1,000 at the time of the sin of the spies? So it's very interesting. Our sages tell us that the 12 spies who were sent to go reconnoiter the land were leaders of 50. Meaning they weren't as great as the 600 leaders of 1,000 or the 6,000 leaders of 100. Now it also tells us that the spies were listed in order of greatness. Joshua is the fifth of the 12 spies listed. So if you do the math, at the time of the sin of the spies, there were at least 6,604 leaders of the people who outranked Joshua. Because you have 600 leaders of 1,000, 6,000 leaders of 100, and the 4 leaders of 50 that outranked Joshua. And somehow Joshua catapulted them all to become Moshe's successor. How that happened? He was a youth. He was a student. He never stopped learning. He never stopped improving. And by the time it arrived, we needed a successor to Moshe. Joshua outranked them all. He was peerless. There are 4 people that we know of that never sinned. The Talmud enumerates them. In the book of Shabbos, on page 55b, the 4 people who never sinned, flawless from day one. Benjamin, son of Jacob. Amram, father of Moshe. Jesse, Yishai, father of David, and Kilav, son of David. Great people, flawless people. But each one of them had an immediate relative who was greater than them, despite having flaws. Jacob was greater than Benjamin. Moshe, of course, was greater than Amram. David was greater than his father Jesse and his son Kilav. What this tells us is that the path to real greatness, to transcendental greatness, almost inevitably is one that's choppy. That's a rocky road. That's the path of Joshua. You have flawless wunderkinds who try to hit it right the first time. They are no match for those like Joshua, who maybe take a more haphazard path of ascent. We had a king who was a flawless wunderkind. His name was Saul. He was the biggest and the strongest and the tallest and the most handsome and the most righteous and the most worthy of all kings. He was the king produced in a lab. And his reign lasted exactly 2 years. And he was deposed. And David the youth, the student, he took his place. In our parsha, we read about Joshua. And this is the first event in the Torah featuring Joshua. And he's described as a youth, as a student. And that's not a reference to his age. It's a reference to his attitude. Scripture tells us, Chanoch lana'ar al pi darko, train, educate a youth as per a path. Gam ki yastin, when they age, when they grow older, they won't depart from it. This, of course, is the most important rule of all of education. To do the instruction and the inputs in our education should be something that fits with a path of the child. My grandfather was fond of a different interpretation of this verse. Chanoch lenar, educate the youth. If someone, as a youth, learns about the imperative of education, of growing, of learning, of being a student, Even as they grow old, they will not depart from this life path and life philosophy of being a student, of needing education, of always engaging in self refinement and development. The Torah does not highlight Joshua's missteps, his failures, his misattributions, his misassessments, his missteps. This is not gratuitous. Joshua is the second greatest leader we ever had after Moshe. Moshe is like the sun, and Joshua is like the moon. When the Torah details the parts of Joshua's development that we would say are not flawless, it's telling us that this is precisely the path that he took to his greatness. He would not be the leader of the Jewish people had he not had these lessons as a youthful student. Our sages tell us, the righteous, they fall down 7 times and they get up. A misstep is an opportunity. It's not a problem, it's an opportunity. If you are a student, if you are a youth, but only if you exploit them to grow. The righteous, how did they become righteous? Well, they fell. They weren't complete. Only God is complete. We're not God, and we're not even angels. So we're incomplete. We're students. We're youths. We're a work in progress. If you have that attitude, then the failure and the missteps, and even, dare I say, criticism, it doesn't sting. It doesn't hurt. That only hurts if you view yourself as a finished product. If you're a youth, if you're a student, those are all opportunities. And we should all be youthful and a student our entire lives. We should develop an attitude, a life philosophy of being always a student, always improving. And then everything that happens to us is another impetus for us to improve, to elevate, and to refine. May we all merit to be students, to be youthful, physically, of course, as well. Yeah, we gotta look good. We gotta look good. But also spiritually, be a spiritual youth and to recognize we're not finished. You know when we're finished? We're only finished when we have no longer the ability to act. That's when we're finished. Until then, we're a youth. We are a student. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. Please, please, please send me your questions, your comments, and your feedback.